Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about security of PoW chains, and this is under general conditions. So in the last course we had looked at some specific attacks like double spend, and here we said that there is a chain created by honest miners, and there was a transaction over here in some particular block, and an adversary wanted to double spend this transaction. So what he did was he created a private chain, and the question there was that if we waited for a certain number of confirmations, then what was the chance of his succeeding. Okay, so this was one particular type of attack, and this analysis was done by Satoshi and improved a little bit by Manny Rosenfeld and so on. Okay. We also looked at a selfish mining attack, where an adversary might generate his own blocks, but he doesn't release it immediately, right? So what he wants to do is he wants to get more share of his blocks in the chain than what he would normally get if he had honest behavior, right? So in case we said that one strategy would be that he would wait for the honest miners to catch up to one behind him, and then he would release his entire chain, right? And we showed that if the attacker has sufficient hashing power, then this actually gets him more blocks in the chain than he would if he would behave honestly. So what about any general attack? So the questions that come. So what about any possible attack? So there may be thousands or even millions of attacks, and we are not sure, we don't know all of them, right, until they are discovered. And so can we prove anything about security of proof of work chains in the general case, right? And ideally we would like to do that. So we know, for example, in BFT protocols, if the attacker has less than 33% of the voting power in a BFT protocol, then we know that we have safety, and under certain conditions of delays in the network we can even guarantee liveness. Okay. So can we do something similar here? Okay, so with any sort of an attack, so let's say that adversary has less than 50% attack, 50% of the hashing power, then do we have safety and liveness? Right? So this seems to be a daunting task, because we'll have to come up with some very general proof where no matter what the adversary does, we still have safety and liveness. Okay. So of course we still have to think about what is safety and liveness. Because as we know, in a Nakamoto chain, like the one Satoshi invented, there is no 100% guarantee that a block is going to be there forever. I mean, this sort of a private chain attack, with some small probability it can remove any particular block in the chain. Okay, there's no, I mean, except for the genesis block, of course, which is going to be there always, there is no 100% guarantee that any other block is going to be there. It might be, there may be some minuscule probability of a block being removed. Right, so we have to define this safety and liveness in more general terms. Okay. The second question is, can we study more realistic network conditions? And what do I mean by this? Well, in Satoshi's analysis, he neglected delays completely. He assumed blocks were going across the network immediately. So there was no question of a natural fork being formed among honest blocks. Right? So this was completely a single chain, and the attacker had his own private chain. But in practice, what may happen is that you may have forks over here in the honest chain, and that might also affect some properties of safety or liveness, right? Because blocks which are orphaned are not going to end up in the longest chain, and so effectively you can say that an adversary has more hashing power compared to the honest people relative to if there had been no delay, right? So even if, let's say, this honest people have 60% of the hashing power and 40% is with the adversary, effectively the adversary has more than 40% of the hashing power. Okay, because all his blocks can lie on a single chain, he doesn't have to worry, whereas some of the honest blocks get orphaned. Okay, so they sort of lose some of their hashing power because of that taking place, right? So can we deal with network delays, so realistic network conditions? And one of the models which has been considered is something called delta synchronous model. And this means that essentially it means that the network delay is delta units, you can think of it. You can say maybe delta seconds. So what does that mean? It means that if an honest miner sends out a block, it is received by everybody else in delta time. So honest block reaches all honest miners in delta time. And if you read any security paper on blockchain, of course, the security folks define it a little bit differently. So they say that the adversary is allowed to delay honest blocks by delta units. And this is a little bit of, an unrealistic way of putting things, because block delays come from network delays. It's not that an adversary adds delay, right? Because if an adversary could add delay, there would be nothing to restrict him to add delta delay. He could, keep delay things forever, right? But that's the way some security papers narrate things. So how are we going to decide what is safety and what is liveness? So I'm going to refer to a paper and there are many different papers on this topic, but this is one of the more recent ones. It came out in CCS 2020. one of the 4 top tier security conferences, and this is a paper titled "Everything is a Race and Nakamoto always wins." And this paper is authored by Amir Dembo and several other authors. So the term that they use for safety is called persistence. So here's the definition. If a transaction Tx appears in a block which is mined more than tau time away from the mining tip of the main chain, of an honest node, then the transaction will be confirmed by all honest nodes in the same position in the same position in the ledger. Okay, and in fact they define what it means to be confirmed in this definition itself. So okay, so I skipped one phrase over here. So such a transaction is called confirmed. So what they are saying is that if you are currently mining on a chain over here and one goes back in time and there is a transaction here Okay, and this transaction was in this block tau units in the past. Okay, then basically you're saying that all other honest miners will have this transaction at the same position in the ledger. Okay. And what about liveness? So if a transaction Tx is received by all honest nodes for more than time u, then all honest nodes will contain the transaction will contain Tx in the same place in the ledger forever. Right, so these are the basic definitions, and we will have to add some probabilities to this. But it is basically going to use this parameter u, and it's going to say that if everybody has received this transaction for some time u, then based on this parameter we'll define a probability in terms of this parameter, and with that probability everybody is going to have the transaction in the ledger at the same position. Okay, so these are sort of somewhat incomplete definitions, and we have to add probabilities in order to connect them to the PoW chains. Okay, but the probabilities will depend on parameters u and, in this particular case, parameter tau. Okay, so before we go on to the theorems that they prove in their paper, we need to have a little bit of notation. Okay, so we are going to say that the block generation rate is lambda. And the network delay is delta, and the attacker's hashing power, hashing fraction, is beta. Okay, so the honest have 1 minus beta. Okay, so what are we going to end up proving? Okay, so I'll just write that out. Theorem 4.2 in their paper, that if beta is less than 1 minus beta. So basically we are saying how we're going to find sort of an upper bound on the hashing power of the attacker, that if the attacker's hashing power is less than this quantity, this is the honest hashing power, 1 plus 1 minus beta times lambda delta. So clearly if delta is 0, if you have a 0 networking delay, this term will vanish, and it would just say that if the attacker has less hashing power than the honest people. But because there is a non-zero networking delay, we have this extra factor. So we are sort of pulling down the honest mining power a little bit in order to take into account the orphaned honest blocks. Okay, so if this is true, then persistence with tau equal to some sigma and liveness with u equal to sigma. Okay, so he's just using the same parameter for both. He's going to write down the probability in terms of this sigma. Okay. Okay. Is achieved by Nakamoto PoW. With probability at least 1 minus e to the power of minus omega sigma to the power of 1 minus epsilon for any epsilon greater than 0. Okay. So effectively what this is saying is that if a block has been there in the chain for some time tau, okay, it's pretty much going to be there except with a very small probability, right? So this quantity is going to 0. Okay, so with very high probability the block is going to be there in the chain forever, right? And if somebody has if all honest miners have got a block for some time sigma, okay, then of course the more that transaction was with them, if it's been there for a longer period of time with them, then it's going to be in the chain at the same location for all honest miners with very high probability. Okay, so this is essentially this term is going to 0 as sigma becomes larger and larger, right? And so essentially we are saying with probability almost 1, we are going to have persistence and liveness. Okay, so he could have written this probability twice, once in terms of tau and once in terms of u, but as a shortcut they have sort of reparameterized both with this sigma. Okay, so this is a very powerful result, and it's saying that if the attacker has less hashing power than the honest people, and of course we are reducing this a little bit to take into account forks which happen due to network delay, then no matter what the attacker does, you're going to have persistence and liveness. So let's outline the basic ideas of their proofs. And the first thing to consider is something called growth. So growth is a question of, it's going to try to answer how fast does the honest chain grow. And this becomes a tricky question because we have networking delays. Because some blocks may actually arrive at the same level in the tree, even if they are honest blocks, and they get orphaned, right? And this is going to be critical in the final proof. So the growth, of course, was proved by people earlier than this Dembo paper, but they were not able to prove results as accurate as what Dembo proved. Okay. Okay. So how fast does the honest chain grow? Right. And let's actually plot with time where these honest blocks are generated. So we know that this is a Poisson process. So let's look at where these particular blocks lie in the chain. So suppose this block has some particular depth, let's say L. Okay, this is the depth in the tree. Can I say that this is at depth L plus 1? Okay, so these are all honest blocks, and the attacker can of course try to mess things up, but I'm only plotting honest blocks here. And so this is a Poisson process, and the rate of generation is what? It's just 1 minus beta times the overall rate, which is lambda. Okay. So it's just another Poisson process, but a little bit sparser than the original rate lambda, because we have to remove the attacker's blocks. So suppose this is at level L of depth in the tree. Okay, so this is, let's say, the genesis block, and this is at level L. The question is this one at L plus 1? And we can say, maybe I should broaden it. So I should say L plus 1 or higher. Okay. So can this particular block fork with the parent? Let's say this is the parent of this block. Can it fork over here? And the answer is, well, really, how much time has elapsed? So suppose this is delta. That means that everybody, all honest miners, have seen this block already by this point in time, because this is the network delay. So definitely the next honest block which is created, which is this one, has to be at a level greater than or equal to L. Okay, because the miner who generated this one, he's an honest miner. So clearly he would have at least mined on a tree as deep as L. Of course, maybe he would have mined here directly, but maybe he would have mined on something deeper than this. For example, if the attacker had released some blocks and created a chain which was longer than this particular chain, right? But we can say that this block has to have depth L plus 1 or higher. Okay. What about this block? Should it be at least, should it be deeper than this one? Let's say that this is delta. In this particular case, we are not sure, because this block was generated within delta of this particular one, And now we are not sure. Maybe this miner saw this block, but maybe did not see this block also. Right? So this may not be at a depth greater than this one. Okay. But what about, so let's suppose we are marking these blocks. Let's say that I mark this first block. I mark this one. So what I do is I skip this because I'm not sure if it is at a depth greater than this block's depth. And what about this one? Is it one at least deeper than this one? And the answer is yes, so I am going to include it, right? Because it's further than delta away from this. Okay. So greater than +1 in depth. Here too I am going to look at delta and so on. Right, so I am going to, let's say, mark these and I am going to skip over some. Okay. So what can I say about the growth of the honest chain in this time period? The growth of the chain is at least equal to the number of marked blocks in a particular time period. Number of marked blocks. In a time period of interest. Okay. So given, let's say I'm interested in this particular period of time, what I can do is I can mark the blocks. I start with the first one, I mark it. I jump ahead by delta and then mark the next one. Jump ahead by delta, skip over anything which came in between, find the next block and mark it, and so on. Okay, so that is the procedure of marking. And the number of marked blocks definitely tells me how much the honest chain has grown in that particular period. It could be larger too, because for example, the miner of this one may have seen a block at least as deep as this one, in which case this is actually going to increase the honest chain. Okay. But we know that at least the chain grows by this much within a particular time period of interest. Okay. So what is this growth rate? So it's clearly we are not marking all the blocks, so we don't have a growth rate equal to this. So some blocks are skipped, and the question is how many such marked blocks would we have in a particular time period of interest. So what exactly is this growth rate? So let's calculate that. So what is the spacing between two consecutive marked blocks over here? Let's think about that for a moment. So we have one block. We skip ahead by delta and then we wait for the next block. So this is the next marked block. If anything comes in between here, it is not marked. Okay. So this is a memoryless process. So what is the average distance between this point and the next block? So it's a Poisson process, and we know that the rate is 1 minus beta times lambda, that is the honest rate, and we know that 1 divided by the rate is the average interarrival time. So the average interarrival time is 1 over lambda times 1 minus beta. Okay, so this is the average spacing. So roughly, if in a very large period of time, so suppose I take a large interval of size t. So then the number of marked blocks is roughly equal to t divided by the average spacing between these blocks. Okay, so that roughly becomes t times right, lambda times 1 minus beta by 1 plus 1 minus beta times lambda delta. Okay. Okay, so clearly we see that this we have already got what we've seen here on the right side. We just have a multiplicative factor, but essentially the growth rate is going to be this, right? So so if you want to look at per unit time, so then we set t equal to 1. Okay, so what we end up with is roughly the growth rate per unit time is lambda times 1 minus beta divided by 1 plus 1 minus beta times lambda delta. Okay, so this is approximately equal, and in practice, of course, you would have something, you might have a little bit higher number of marked blocks or a little bit lower, but you can make this rigorous. You can show that with very high probability that within plus or minus epsilon of this quantity you will have that many marked blocks. Okay, and that can be done by something called a Chernoff bound. Okay, so that actual growth okay in time t is equal to what this growth t times whatever, right? Let's just call this quantity let's just call it this quantity g times 1 let's say I should say belongs to let's say new one plus new, right? And this happens except with probability negligible in t. Okay, so that means it happens with probability roughly 1. 1 minus, what this means is it happens with probability 1 minus e to the power of minus omega some constant times t. Right, t nu, let's say t nu, something of this kind, right? Okay. So effectively we are saying that the honest chain at least grows by a certain amount in a particular time. Okay, and that's going to be crucial for the proof of this result, which we had shown a little bit above. Okay. So what we want to show is if the attacker has less hashing power then this quantity, which is essentially related to the growth rate, then we are good. We are going to have persistence with high probability and we're going to have liveness also with high probability. So how do we prove this? It seems very tricky to do, and there are different papers which actually do this. It started out, people came out with proofs which were not, which didn't give as accurate results as I've shown over here in theorem 4.2. Okay, but over the years people improved the results, and in fact in CCS 2020 there are 2 papers, and we are going to look at one of them. Okay, which is this paper by Amir Dembo and his co-authors. So how do we make use of the growth rate which we've calculated? Okay, we want to say that no matter what the attacker does, we are still going to have persistence and liveness. Okay. So let's look at the ideas of the proof. So first idea is something called the fictitious honest tree. So we have the genesis block, and there could be various forks and so on. And let's say that I'm going to draw this attacker block with a circle. Okay, let's say it looks something like this. Okay, so let's say that this is the actual tree. Now we are going to call these H0, let's just say H0, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, let's say this is H6. And what the authors have proposed is that I just extract all these honest blocks and assume that they form some sort of a tree of some kind. So we are not going to show any connections between them because there really may not be connections. For example, between H1 and H3 there is no direct hash pointer. Okay, it doesn't really form a tree, but we'll just write them out this way. So I am going to write these out in chronological order, okay, in which let's say that the moment that they were generated I just write it down here, right? and this is just the chronological order in which these honest blocks were created. Okay. Now if I were to draw what the attacker is doing, because we really want to consider all his strategies, so what the author says, let's look at the attacker blocks, and all attacker blocks will have to have a root somewhere in this fictitious tree. Okay. So let's say these ones, this particular small tree over here is from H2. There is one block coming out of H3, one from H4, right, and so on, right. So what I show here is only attacker blocks. Okay, so there is this fictitious tree, it's just a grouping of all honest blocks, and I've separated out all the attacker blocks, and all the attacker blocks have to hang from this in one way or the other. So it could be an elaborate tree hanging from one of these blocks, okay, but all of them will have a root somewhere over here. Okay, so this is one idea that they use. Now there is another key idea which is used, and that is something called a Nakamoto block. So what is a Nakamoto block? Well, a Nakamoto block is one of these which is going to be there in the blockchain forever. Okay. So let's say that this is a Nakamoto block. So of course this is the Nakamoto block, definitely. That's sort of a trivial case of a Nakamoto block. So Nakamoto block is an honest block which let's say enters the longest chain of all honest miners and remains in the longest chain forever. So this is the idea, and really what we should say is not forever, but it remains with very high probability in the chain forever. Let's say with high probability. Right? So suppose we'll have to figure out what these Nakamoto blocks are and so on, but suppose this H7 is a Nakamoto block. What does it mean? It means that when this is generated, it's sent out by the honest miner who generates it to all other honest miners, and then this H7 remains in the longest chain forever. And what does it mean? It means that any honest miner will always have this in its chain. Okay, so effectively what is it meaning? It means that the attacker is not going to be able to generate a chain from somewhere over here which is going to be longer than this one. Even if he does that, the honest chain would have sort of taken off from here, and it would have been far ahead of the attacker's chain, any chain coming from here. Okay, so that's the idea, and so basically this block is going to be there forever. Okay, so these blocks generated after this honest block, okay, all the honest miners have got this one, so all these are going to have depth greater than h7. Okay, so we can just say that if there is an h8 and h9 and so on, so the depth is greater than that of h7. So what is the intuition over here? So this h7 has a particular depth, and all these other blocks in this fictitious tree, so to speak, coming after this have to have depth greater than this, because we said that all honest miners included this block in their chain, right? So if whenever they generate any other block, it would have to be at a depth greater than this, right? So how would an attacker actually get rid of this h7? He can't create a tree from somewhere here and kill this, because this would be a parent of any of these. It would be a head in the chain, right? So what he would have to do is he would have to create a tree somewhere from here and dislodge this, right? So I'm only looking at this first criterion. It enters the block, let's say, of everybody. So if at all this has to be removed, it has to be removed from some tree created by the attacker over here. It cannot be removed by a tree of the attacker created over here, right? So effectively, what is the attacker going to do? So the attacker has to extend whatever I've shown here in red, right? And he will have to create some chain or chains over here in order to overtake the longest honest chain. Okay, and only in that way is he going to dislodge this h7. Okay. But the intuition over here is that that is not going to be non-trivial to do, because no honest miner is going to help him extend whatever is here in red, because all honest miners have already they've already accepted h7. So the attacker is going to have to extend all these chains on his own, and that is where growth comes in. So if the attacker's growth is less than the honest chain's growth, it's going to take him some time to catch up here, but in the meantime the honest chains have already grown quite long, and then he has to play a catch-up game in which he, with very high probability, he's going to lose out. Okay, so that's the whole intuition over here, but with a little bit more rigor how this is done, let's think about it. So how do we find out that these Nakamoto blocks occur and they occur somewhat frequently? So what the paper proves is that every honest block has a probability P of becoming an honest block, becoming a Nakamoto block. Okay, and the proofs are quite elaborate, but suppose we have this, then how do we have safety and liveness? Well, because if you have a Nakamoto block, it's going to be there forever, right? And so let's talk about persistence. So by definition, Nakamoto blocks stay forever. With high probability. And how do I have liveness? So I have liveness because each of them becomes a Nakamoto block with probability P. So essentially you have a coin toss experiment. So every so often you will have a heads, even if this P is a small number. You wait for a large enough number of honest blocks and one of them will become a Nakamoto block, right? And so that's going to give you the liveness which has been earlier defined. Okay. So let's say every 1 over P blocks is a Nakamoto block. On average, right? Maybe I should say it here, on average. Every 1 over P blocks is a Nakamoto block. And so we are guaranteeing that we have an honest block entering the blockchain of all honest miners every so often. And that's going to guarantee liveness because the honest blocks are going to include transactions. Okay, and transactions get into these blocks and there is liveness guarantee. So it guarantees that transactions can enter the chain regularly. Okay, so let's talk about a proof sketch. So what are the requirements? So in the proof of the paper, they say that first of all, requirement that they impose for a Nakamoto block is that it should be a loaner. So what is a loaner block? So a block, an honest block, which does not have another honest block within delta of it. Okay. So it's a loaner, nothing else is very close to it. Okay, so how does this help? So let's think about it. Suppose we ignored for the time being any adversary blocks. Okay, so this particular block would be seen by all honest miners at this point in time. This is where it was generated, right? So all honest miners have not seen any honest block over here, right? This block is generated and then everybody sees it by this point in time. Okay. So what would we see? So there would be some sort of a blockchain. Maybe there are attacker blocks or whatever, right? And suppose there is some tree over here and now this one is generated over here. Okay. So all honest miners are going to see this loaner, okay, and provided the attacker doesn't release any block here, all of them are going to mine on this. Okay, so suppose no attacker block is released here. Sorry, up to here. What is going to happen? So all honest miners will see this block. They are mining on whatever block, but then they see this block, and we can show that all honest miners are going to accept this block and they're going to mine on this. Right? So why is this the case? Because whatever blocks were generated over here before this, everybody is going to see by the time this block is actually generated. So everybody has the same picture of the blockchain tree up to here, at least all honest miners, right? Because there was a gap here in which no honest blocks were created and no attacker blocks were also released, we are seeing. So everybody sees the same tree over here just before this one was created, and once this is generated, it's going to give a uniquely longest tree. This is going to be it's going to extend the longest chain for everyone, and again there were no blocks seen here, so this is a unique longest tip, I should say. And all honest miners will mine on this at this particular point in time, right? Okay, so this is what this loner block, it has a nice property that if no other blocks were released by, let's say, the attacker, and no blocks were anyway generated by the honest miners in plus or minus delta, then this would actually become the unique longest, the unique tip of the longest chain for all honest miners. Okay, so a loner block is defined like this, that a block, it's an honest block which doesn't have any other honest block which was generated in plus or minus delta of it, right? And the thing is that we are assuming that there are these other properties, that the attacker has not released any block in between here which is going to affect this being the unique tip of the longest chain for everybody else, right? Okay. So this is not enough. Just having a loner block is not enough to guarantee that it's going to become a Nakamoto block. Okay, and that's what the rest of the paper deals with. Okay, so just to be clear about this, so this is not the definition of loner. So loner just means that what I've shown here, that there is no honest block in plus or minus delta. So loner block means so no honest block in plus or minus delta of it, right? So it is itself an honest block, but it doesn't have any other honest block within a little bit distance or a little bit of time, plus or minus. Okay. So how do they go about proving that you do have these Nakamoto blocks? So first of all, they see what is the chance of any individual block becoming a loner block, and because it's a Poisson process, it has nice properties that it has this property of reversibility, right? And you can look at each block independently, and you can look at what comes after it and what was there before it. You can sort of look at it independently. Okay, that's one of the interesting properties of a Poisson process. Okay, okay, so suppose we have a loner block, and it is there somewhere in this fictitious tree, right? We have the genesis block, okay, so I'm just listing these out. Now if the attacker wants to kill this block, he wants to somehow not let this block be in some honest chain's longest chain. What does he have to do? Now he has to create his own chain. Okay, he has various options. And what we can do is we can look at this Poisson reversibility process, and we can look at it this way as if it is a Poisson process. And you can say what is the weight of all these attacker blocks. So you can say that whatever this time is, right, it's going to be proportional to that time, but the growth rate, so suppose we are interested in suppose this is the particular point in time we are interested in, this is my t, and I'm looking at some other point in time which could go all the way up to the genesis block. Let's say this is t0. So now the attacker's growth rate is roughly lambda beta, right? And so the difference in this time, so roughly the weight over here is proportional to this, okay, with high probability. So you can find out a situation in which you can find out the probability using the analysis tools. You can find out the probability that this, it's not exactly going to be this, it's going to be a little bit greater than this or less than this, but you can find out the probability that this total weight is going to be less than the depth of this in the chain. So assume beta is less than what we had earlier, 1 minus beta by 1 plus 1 minus beta times lambda delta. Okay, so I find the probability of this being somewhat less than the depth of this in the tree. Okay, so I am giving you a very high level picture of what they prove in the paper. Total blocks in the, let's say, red trees between T0 and T is, let's say, is n less than depth of loner minus depth of h1, right? So you can do this for various times of interest, right? And so I'm just showing you for one particular point in time. Okay, what is it going to be, right? Okay, so let's say that we find some probability of this, and we are saying that the attackers, in the best case for him, all of these would just form a single chain. Okay, so that his attacker's chain is close enough in depth to this one. But of course, if he splits up like this, then it's worse for him, because the longest chain for him is going to be way behind this, right? But anyway, in the best case for the attacker, he's at least n blocks behind the honest chain at this point in time, and we know the probability for that is calculated in the paper. Okay, so now what you have to do, now we want to know what is the probability that any of these chains is going to be able to dislodge this. So this is somewhat related to Nakamoto's analysis, which he did which we studied in the earlier semester. So we are saying here that the attacker chains, all these red chains, are behind at least by n blocks this particular loner block, which means that this block has got into the chain of all honest miners. Okay, so let me just write that down. For this event, since n is greater than 0, all honest miners accept the loner block as their longest chain tip, right? Because all attacker chains are way behind the honest chain, and this is a loner block, so there are no competing honest blocks with it, so everybody accepts it. Now for this block to become a Nakamoto block, we want to show that the attacker will never be able to kill it any time in the future. Okay, that should happen with very high probability. Okay, so let's go back here. So we say that this one is accepted by all honest miners. So after time t in the future, no honest miner is going to mine anywhere over here, because I mean, even if the attacker releases all his blocks over here, they are going to be a depth lower than the depth of this one. So honest people are not going to be bothered about this. So the attacker has to overtake the longest honest chain over here. So let's say that we are looking in the future over here. There are several of these honest blocks. Okay, so this is the fictitious tree over here. So if the attacker has to remove this, it's not enough for him to actually extend a chain over here. He can't extend a chain over here and expect to kill this one, because all of these have this block as their parent, right? Because we said this becomes lodged in the chain, and all honest miners are going to mine on this. This is going to be an ancestor of all these honest blocks, right? So the only option for the attacker is to try to kill this, is to actually extend this, and what he's going to have to do is that he is going to have to create a chain which starts from somewhere earlier here and exceeds the length of the longest chain of the honest miners. Okay, so what is the chance of him doing that? We know that the growth of the chain from t onwards is going to be at least that g quantity which I had shown earlier. Okay, that's the growth per unit time, right? The attacker is behind and he has to catch up, and we know that that happens with a very small probability, right? And the longer that this particular block is in the chain, let's say that I waited for some time mu over here, or let's call it tau, okay, let me call it mu, because I think I've used tau differently. Okay. Okay, so if this has been in the chain for a certain amount of time mu, then the attacker has only mu time in which to generate a chain larger than the honest chain from here to here, plus whatever deficit he had over here. Okay. Growth of honest chain in T to T plus mu is roughly G times mu with high probability, and growth of attacker chains starting earlier than T okay in maybe I should say starting earlier than the loner block, is nearly beta times lambda times mu with high probability. Okay, so this implies that the honest chains at T plus mu are D plus G mu, where D is the depth of the loner, and attacker chains so either a single chain or multiple chain or at most, so the attacker chain has begun with a deficit D minus N, okay, beta times lambda times mu, okay, and with very high probability D minus N plus beta lambda mu is going to be less than D plus G mu. Okay, since beta times lambda is less than G, this is what is given. Okay. Okay, so this is the idea of the proof, and the rigorous proof actually goes through many pages. It's there in the paper, and they have to look at a lot of corner cases and so on. But this is a broad idea of what they're doing, and I thought this whole idea of a fictitious tree was very clever, right? And because really you have to consider all possible strategies of the attacker, and so what they've done is they made the attacker's trees or blocks hang from this fictitious tree, and once you have a loner block, you can sort of challenge the attacker. You have to find some of these loner blocks for which the attacker is behind with his red chains here, and that means that he will never be able to catch up and overtake the honest chain anytime in the future. Okay, this you can prove by random walk theory and so on. Okay. So a clever idea, and so essentially we are proving that given this particular condition, that the attacker's hashing rate is less than the honest minus hashing rate, first decreased by a factor taking into account network delays. But given this, you can show that you're always going to have persistence and liveness with high probability. So these proof techniques are in fact useful when we want to analyze other systems, for example systems with anchors or systems with links, or in fact other protocols which are looked at in this particular paper, There are certain other protocols like Ouroboros, which is a proof of stake protocol. The same ideas are used to look at persistence and liveness over there. Right, but of course for links and anchors we had to make some changes, because here you just have a single delay delta. All blocks are delayed by this much amount of time, whereas for anchors and links we said that they go faster than blocks. So we had to modify our analysis a little bit, but the same ideas of the fictitious tree and so on can be used even when we have anchors and links.